You know, there's something absolutely beautiful about the moment when you stop trying so hard, when you stop pushing against the river of life and instead learn to flow with it, when you stop clenching your fists around everything you think you need to control and instead open your hands to receive what's actually coming your way. Most of us have been taught that faith is something you do with your mind, that it's a belief system, a set of ideas you hold on to tightly. But real faith isn't mental at all. It's more like breathing. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to work at it. You just trust that your lungs know what to do. Real faith is the same way. It's a knowing that runs so much deeper than thought. The trouble with most of us is that we've been trained to be control freaks. We think we have to manage every detail of our lives, plan every outcome, force every door open. We live in a constant state of anxiety because we're trying to do the impossible, control a universe that's vastly bigger and more intelligent than our little minds could ever comprehend. But here's what I want you to understand. The universe isn't random. It's not chaos. There's an intelligence at work here that's so much more sophisticated than anything we could dream up. When you really get this, when you really feel it in your bones, faith becomes as natural as water flowing downhill. Think about how your body works. Right now, as you're listening to these words, your heart is beating, your blood is flowing, your cells are regenerating, your immune system is working, your digestive system is processing food. Are you doing any of this? Are you sitting there thinking, okay, heart, now beat, okay, liver, now process these toxins? Of course not. There's a wisdom in your body that's taken care of all of this without any help from your conscious mind. The same intelligence that grows your fingernails and heals your cuts is the same intelligence that moves the planets and turns the seasons. It's the same intelligence that brought you into existence in the first place. And you think you need to micromanage your life. You think you know better than this cosmic intelligence what's good for you. This is where surrender comes in. Surrender isn't giving up. It's not being passive or lazy. It's recognizing that there's something much bigger than your ego at work here and learning to cooperate with it instead of fighting it. When you try to control everything, you're like a wave trying to control the ocean. It's exhausting and it's impossible. But when you surrender, you become like a leaf floating on a stream. You're still moving, you're still going somewhere, but you're not fighting the current anymore. You're dancing with it. Now, I know what you're thinking. But what about my goals? What about my ambitions? What about taking responsibility for my life? And I'm not telling you to become a doormat. I'm telling you to become a partner with life instead of an adversary. When you're in true surrender, you become incredibly effective. Why? Because you're not wasting energy fighting reality anymore. You're not pushing against closed doors. You're not trying to make things happen that aren't ready to happen. Instead, you're alert, you're responsive, you're ready to move when the moment is right. It's like learning to sail. A good sailor doesn't try to control the wind. They learn to work with it. They adjust their sails, they read the currents, they go with the flow, while still steering toward their destination. That's what surrender looks like in real life. The ego hates this idea because the ego thinks it's in charge. The ego thinks it's the captain of the ship. But the ego is just a tiny part of who you are. It's like a wave thinking it's separate from the ocean. The wave is the ocean, just temporarily taking a particular form. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe expressing itself as you. When you really get this, when you really feel this, surrender becomes the most natural thing in the world. You're not giving up control to something outside yourself. You're giving up the illusion of control to something that you already are. This is what faith really means. It's not believing in something you can't see. It's recognizing something you've always been. It's like a fish suddenly realizing it's been swimming in water all along. The water was always there, supporting it, sustaining it, but the fish was so focused on swimming that it forgot about the medium that made swimming possible. Life is like that water. It's always been supporting you, sustaining you, guiding you, but you've been so busy trying to swim that you forgot about the intelligence that's making it all possible. When you surrender to this intelligence, when you have faith in this process, something miraculous happens. Life starts to flow. Opportunities appear. Synchronicities multiply. The right people show up at the right time. The right doors open. Not because you're manipulating anything, but because you're finally in harmony with the natural flow of things. It's like tuning a radio. When you're out of tune, all you hear is static. But when you find the right frequency, suddenly the music comes through crystal clear. Surrender is finding the right frequency. Faith is trusting that the music is always there, waiting for you to tune in. But here's the paradox. The more you try to surrender, the more you're still trying to control. Surrender can't be forced, it can only be allowed. It's like trying to fall asleep. The harder you try, the more awake you become. Sleep comes when you stop trying, when you just let go. And the same is true with faith. You can't manufacture faith. You can't force yourself to believe. But you can stop doing the things that block faith. You can stop trying to figure everything out. You can stop demanding that life conform to your expectations. You can stop treating the universe like it's your employee. When you do this, when you really let go, you start to notice something amazing. Life has been taking care of you all along, not in the way you expected, not according to your plans, but in ways that are often much better than anything you could have imagined. Think about your own life. Think about the things you worried about 5 years ago. How many of them actually turned out to be problems? How many of the things you thought you needed turned out to be irrelevant? How many of the disasters you imagined never happened? How many wonderful things came into your life that you never saw coming? This is the intelligence of life at work. It's not random, it's not cruel, and it's not indifferent. It's incredibly wise, incredibly compassionate, incredibly creative, but it works in ways that are often completely different from what our rational minds expect. The rational mind likes straight lines. It likes predictable outcomes. It likes to know where it's going and how it's going to get there. But life doesn't work in straight lines. Life works in spirals, in cycles, in patterns that are too complex for the rational mind to grasp. This is why faith is so important. Faith allows you to trust the process even when you can't see the destination. It allows you to take the next step even when you don't know where the path is leading. It allows you to plant seeds even when you don't know what will grow. And surrender? Surrender is what makes this possible. Surrender is letting go of your need to know, your need to control, your need to understand everything before you act. Surrender is saying yes to life before you know what life is going to bring you. This doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean not having preferences or not taking action. It means holding your preferences lightly. It means taking action from a place of inspiration rather than desperation. It means being willing to change direction when life shows you a better way. When you live this way, when you combine faith with surrender, life becomes an adventure instead of a struggle. You start to see that every experience, pleasant or unpleasant, is teaching you something. You start to see that every person who comes into your life is bringing you something you need. You start to see that every challenge is an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, more compassionate. This is what spiritual maturity looks like. It's not about having all the answers. It's about being comfortable with the questions. It's not about never feeling afraid. It's about feeling the fear and trusting anyway. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about seeing mistakes as part of the learning process. The mind wants guarantees. The mind wants to know that if you do X, you'll get Y. But life doesn't work that way. Life is much more creative, much more mysterious, much more playful than the mind can comprehend. This is why faith is essential. Faith allows you to act without guarantees. Faith allows you to love without knowing if you'll be loved back. Faith allows you to give without knowing if you'll receive. And here's the beautiful secret. When you live with this kind of faith, when you surrender to this process, you receive so much more than you ever imagined possible. Not necessarily in the form you expected, but in ways that are often much more fulfilling. When you stop trying to get love and start giving love, love flows through your life in abundance. When you stop trying to get security and start trusting life, you find a security that doesn't depend on external circumstances. When you stop trying to get happiness and start being present to what's actually happening, happiness becomes your natural state. This is the paradox of surrender. By giving up control, you gain real power. By giving up the need to understand, you gain true wisdom. By giving up the demand for certainty, you gain genuine confidence. But the ego fights this every step of the way. The ego says, but what if I surrender and nothing good happens? What if I trust and I get hurt? What if I let go and everything falls apart? And these are valid concerns. The ego's job is to protect you, to keep you safe, to maintain the status quo. But here's what the ego doesn't understand. The status quo is not safety. The status quo is stagnation. The status quo is a slow death of the spirit. Real safety comes from being in harmony with life, from flowing with the current instead of fighting it. When you're fighting the current, you exhaust yourself. When you're flowing with it, you're supported by the entire river. The river wants to take you somewhere beautiful, but you have to be willing to let it carry you. This is what trust really means. It's not blind faith. It's not believing that everything will work out exactly as you want it to. It's trusting that life is intelligent, that life is creative, that life is on your side, even when it doesn't look that way. Sometimes life takes you through difficult experiences. Sometimes you lose things you thought you needed. Sometimes you have to go through periods of confusion, of uncertainty, of challenge. But if you have faith, if you surrender to the process, you start to see that these difficult experiences are not punishments, they're initiations. They're opportunities to grow beyond who you thought you were. Every challenge is life asking you, are you ready to become more than you've been? Are you ready to let go of the old version of yourself and step into something bigger? And if you have faith, if you surrender to the process, you can say yes to this invitation. This is how transformation happens. Not through force, not through willpower, not through trying to change yourself. Transformation happens through surrender. It happens when you stop trying to be someone else and start being more authentically yourself. It happens when you stop trying to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be and start expressing who you really are. But who are you really? You're not your thoughts. Thoughts come and go. You're not your emotions. Emotions come and go. You're not your circumstances. Circumstances come and go. You're not even your body. Your body is constantly changing. You are the awareness that notices all of these things. You are the consciousness that experiences thoughts, emotions, circumstances, and sensations. You are the space in which all of life happens. And this space is vast. It's peaceful. It's eternal. It's connected to everything. When you identify with this awareness instead of with your thoughts and emotions, surrender becomes natural. Why? Because awareness doesn't need to control anything. Awareness simply witnesses, simply experiences, simply allows. Awareness is already at peace with whatever is happening. Happy is at peace because whatever is happening. This is what meditation teaches you. Not to control your thoughts, but to stop identifying with them. Not to suppress your emotions, but to stop being controlled by them. Meditation shows you that you are the sky, not the clouds. The clouds of thoughts and emotions pass through you, but they don't define you. And when you know yourself as the sky, when you know yourself as awareness, faith becomes effortless. You don't have to work at trusting life, because you realize that you are life. You don't have to try to surrender, because you realize that there was never really anything to surrender to. There was only the illusion of separation. This is the ultimate understanding. You are not separate from the universe. You are the universe, experiencing itself subjectively. The same intelligence that creates galaxies is the intelligence that beats your heart. The same love that holds the planets in their orbits is the love that flows through your veins. When you really get this, when you really feel this, everything changes. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstances and start seeing yourself as a participant in a cosmic dance. You stop seeing life as something that happens to you. This is what it means to live with faith. This is what it means to surrender. It's not about giving up your power. It's about recognizing that your real power was never in your ability to control external circumstances. Your real power is in your ability to choose how you respond to whatever life brings you. And when you respond from a place of faith, when you respond from a place of surrender, you become a conduit for the intelligence of life itself. You become a channel for love, for wisdom, for creativity, for healing. You become an agent of transformation, not just for yourself, but for everyone whose life you touch. This is your true purpose. Not to accumulate things or achieve status or prove yourself to others. Your true purpose is to be a conscious participant in the evolution of consciousness itself, to be a unique expression of the divine creativity that's constantly creating the world anew. And you don't have to be perfect to fulfill this purpose. You don't have to have it all figured out. You don't have to be enlightened or spiritual or special in any way. You just have to be willing to trust, willing to surrender, willing to let life live through you. This is what changes everything. Not your circumstances, not your personality, not your history. What changes everything is your willingness to stop fighting life and start dancing with it. Your willingness to stop trying to be in control and start being in harmony. When you do this, when you really let go, you find that life has been waiting for you all along. Not the life you thought you wanted, but the life you actually need. The life that will bring out the best in you, that will help you grow, that will use your unique gifts in service of something larger than yourself. This is the promise of faith. This is the gift of surrender. Not that you'll get everything you want, but that you'll become everything you're capable of being. Not that life will be easy, but that it will be meaningful. Not that you'll never face challenges, but that you'll face them with grace, with wisdom, with an unshakable inner peace. So stop trying so hard. Stop pushing against the river. Stop clenching your fists around the things you think you need to control. Open your hands. Open your heart. Open your mind. Let life flow through you. Trust the process. Have faith in the intelligence that created you and sustains you every moment. You are not alone in this universe. You are not separate from the source of life. You are an expression of it, a manifestation of it, a unique and precious part of it. And when you remember this, when you feel this, when you live from this understanding, everything becomes possible. This is the invitation that life is constantly offering you, not to become someone else, but to become more fully yourself, not to escape from reality, but to embrace it more completely, not to transcend your humanity, but to express it more authentically. The choice is always yours. In every moment you can choose fear or faith, control or surrender, resistance or flow, and with each choice you're not just shaping your own experience, you're contributing to the consciousness of the entire planet. So choose wisely, choose with faith, choose with surrender, choose to trust the process that brought you into being and that sustains you every moment. Choose to participate consciously in the grand adventure of existence itself. Life is not happening to you, life is happening as you. You are not a victim of the universe, you are the universe becoming conscious of itself. And when you really get this, when you really feel this, everything you've ever wanted becomes possible, because you realize that what you really wanted all along was not things or circumstances or experiences, but the recognition of what you already are. You are the eternal expressing itself in time. You are the infinite expressing itself in form. You are the divine expressing itself in human experience. And when you surrender to this truth, when you have faith in this reality, you become a living demonstration of the miracle that existence truly is. This is your invitation. This is your opportunity. This is your moment. Stop trying to figure it all out and start trusting the process. Stop trying to control the outcome and start enjoying the journey. Stop trying to be perfect and start being present. The universe is not a machine that you need to operate. It's a living system that you're part of. And when you align yourself with its intelligence, when you trust its wisdom, when you surrender to its flow, you become a powerful force for good in the world. You become someone who radiates peace instead of anxiety, love instead of fear, trust instead of worry. You become someone who sees opportunities instead of obstacles, possibilities instead of limitations, gifts instead of problems. This is what faith and surrender can do for you. Not change your circumstances, but change your relationship to your circumstances. Not eliminate challenges, but transform how you meet them. Not give you control over life, but help you flow with it so gracefully that you become one with it. And when you become one with life, when you surrender to its intelligence, when you have faith in its process, you discover something wonderful. You were never separate from it in the first place. You were always part of the dance, always part of the flow, always part of the magnificent intelligence that creates and sustains all things. The only thing that ever kept you from recognizing this was the illusion that you were separate, that you were alone, that you had to do everything by yourself. But that illusion was just a thought, just a story you were telling yourself. And now you can choose a different story. You can choose to remember that you are part of something vast and wonderful and intelligent. You can choose to trust that this intelligence has your best interests at heart. You can choose to surrender to its guidance, to have faith in its process, to flow with its rhythm. This is not the end of your journey. This is the beginning of your real life, the life you were meant to live, the life that flows from faith and surrender, the life that trusts the process and dances with whatever comes. Welcome to this life. Welcome to this moment. Welcome to the recognition of what you've always been and what you'll always be. A unique and precious expression of the infinite intelligence that creates and sustains all things. Trust it. Surrender to it. Have faith in it, and let it live through you in ways that will amaze and delight you. The adventure begins now. What's fascinating is how we've been conditioned to believe that spiritual growth requires effort, that enlightenment is something we achieve through discipline and practice. But the truth is much simpler and more radical than that. Awakening isn't something you do, it's something you stop doing. It's not about adding something to yourself, it's about removing the barriers you've built between yourself and your natural state of being. Consider how a child approaches life. They don't wake up in the morning with a to-do list of worries. They don't spend their days calculating probabilities and planning for every possible outcome. They simply respond to what's in front of them with curiosity and wonder. They haven't learned yet to distrust life, to second-guess every impulse, to analyze every feeling until it loses its vitality. This isn't to say we should become childish, but rather that we should reclaim that childlike quality of spontaneous response to life. When you're truly present, when you're really here now, you don't need faith as a concept, because you're living it. You don't need surrender as a technique, because you're already flowing with what is. The problem is that we've been taught to live in our heads, to treat thinking as the most important thing we do. But thinking is just one function of consciousness, like digestion is one function of the body. You wouldn't try to digest your food consciously, and you don't need to think your way through life consciously either. There's a deeper intelligence at work that knows exactly what to do in each moment. This intelligence shows up in the perfect timing of events, in the way solutions appear just when they're needed, in the synchronicities that seem too meaningful to be coincidental. It shows up in the way your body heals itself, in the way plants grow toward the light, in the way rivers always find their way to the sea. When you align yourself with this intelligence, when you stop trying to outsmart it or improve upon it, life becomes effortless. Not because there are no challenges, but because you're no longer fighting the challenges. You're dancing with them, learning from them, allowing them to transform you into something greater than you were before. This is why suffering often becomes a doorway to wisdom. When our usual strategies stop working, when our control mechanisms fail, when our plans fall apart, we're forced to find another way, and that other way is always surrender. It's always trust. It's always faith in something larger than our individual will. But here's what most people miss. This larger something isn't outside of you. It's not a deity that you need to appease or a force that you need to petition. It's the deepest part of your own being, the part that's connected to everything else, the part that knows without having to think about it. When you access this part of yourself, when you live from this place, you become incredibly creative. Not because you're trying to be creative, but because creativity is the natural expression of consciousness when it's not constrained by fear and control. You become spontaneous, responsive, alive, in ways that your calculating mind could never achieve. This is what happens when you stop trying to live your life according to someone else's script. Society gives us templates for how to be successful, how to be happy, how to be loved. But these templates are generic, one-size-fits-all solutions to the deeply individual mystery of existence. When you surrender to your own authentic nature, when you have faith in your own unique path, you stop trying to fit into these templates and start creating your own. The courage to be yourself, to trust your own inner guidance, to follow your own path even when others don't understand it, this is one of the highest forms of faith. It's faith in the intelligence that created you as you are, not as someone else thinks you should be. And here's the paradox. The more authentic you become, the more you realize how connected you are to everything else. Authenticity doesn't lead to isolation, it leads to deeper intimacy with life. When you stop pretending to be someone you're not, when you stop trying to meet everyone else's expectations, you become available for real relationship, real connection, real love. This is because authenticity is natural. It's what you are when you're not trying to be anything else. And nature is inherently harmonious. When you're being naturally yourself, you automatically fit into the larger pattern of existence, just like a tree fits into a forest or a wave fits into the ocean. The fear that keeps us from this authenticity is the fear that we won't be accepted, that we won't be loved, that we won't be enough. But these fears are based on the illusion of separation. They assume that love is something we have to earn, that acceptance is something we have to work for, that our worth depends on our performance. But love isn't something you get, it's something you are. Acceptance isn't something you achieve, it's something you give, starting with yourself. Worth isn't something you prove, it's something you recognize as your birthright. When you really understand this, when you feel it in your bones, surrender becomes easy. Why? Because you're no longer trying to get anything from life. You're not trying to manipulate outcomes to prove your worth or earn love or achieve security. You're simply being, and being is enough. This doesn't mean you stop having goals or preferences. It means you hold them lightly. You work toward what inspires you, but you don't attach your identity to the outcomes. You care about results, but you don't stake your happiness on them. You engage fully with life, but you don't grip it so tightly that you strangle its natural flow. When you live this way, you become like water. Water is soft and yielding, but it can wear away the hardest stone. It always finds a way around obstacles. It takes the shape of whatever container holds it, but it never loses its essential nature. It seeks the lowest places, but it nourishes everything it touches. This is the power of surrender, not the power to dominate or control, but the power to flow, to adapt, to find creative solutions, to nourish whatever needs nourishing. It's a feminine kind of power, receptive and responsive, but incredibly effective. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that power means force, that strength means rigidity, that success means domination. But nature teaches us something different. The most successful organisms are the most adaptable ones. The strongest trees are the ones that bend in the wind. The most powerful rivers are the ones that flow around obstacles rather than trying to smash through them. When you surrender to life's intelligence, when you have faith in its process, you become incredibly adaptable. You don't break when things don't go according to plan because you weren't rigidly attached to the plan in the first place. You don't despair when one door closes because you trust that another will open. You don't panic when circumstances change because you know that change is the only constant. This flexibility, this resilience, this ability to flow with whatever comes, this is what real strength looks like. It's not the brittle strength of the ego that shatters under pressure, but the supple strength of the bamboo that bends without breaking. And here's the beautiful thing. When you live with this kind of strength, when you combine faith with surrender, you become a gift to everyone around you. You become a source of calm in the storm, a reminder that peace is always possible, a living demonstration that life can be trusted. People are drawn to this quality because it's so rare in our anxious, controlling world. Most people are exhausted from trying to manage everything, from fighting battles that can't be won, from pushing against forces that are much stronger than they are. When they encounter someone who has learned to flow with life rather than fight it, it's like coming across an oasis in the desert. You don't have to preach or teach or try to convince anyone of anything. You just have to be yourself, authentically and fearlessly. Your presence becomes the teaching. Your peace becomes the sermon. Your joy becomes the invitation. This is how transformation spreads in the world, not through arguments or persuasion, but through example, not through force or coercion, but through attraction. When people see someone living with genuine faith and surrender, they remember that this is possible for them too. And this is perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this path. It doesn't require you to be special or gifted or chosen in any way. It only requires you to be willing. Willing to stop fighting. Willing to start trusting. Willing to let life live through you, instead of trying to live life according to your small plans and limited understanding. The moment you make this choice, the moment you say yes to life unconditionally, everything begins to change. Not necessarily your external circumstances, but your relationship to them. Not necessarily your problems, but your ability to dance with them. Not necessarily your story, but your understanding of who's telling it. You are not the small, separate self you thought you were. You are the infinite expressing itself in finite form. You are the eternal playing in time. You are the divine dreaming itself into existence. And when you remember this, when you live from this understanding, faith and surrender become as natural as breathing. The journey continues, but now you know you're not taking it alone. You're being carried by the same intelligence that moves the stars and grows the flowers. You're being guided by the same wisdom that beats your heart and heals your wounds. You're being loved by the same love that holds the entire universe in its embrace. Trust it, surrender to it, have faith in it, and let it carry you home to yourself.
You've probably noticed this peculiar phenomenon, haven't you? You go to a gathering, a party, some social event, and you watch the people around you. They're animated, energized, feeding off the crowd like they're plugging into some great cosmic battery. They get louder as the evening goes on, more expansive, more alive. And then there's you, standing in the corner perhaps, or making your way through the motions. And with each passing hour you can feel something draining out of you, like someone opened a tap at the bottom of your being, and your life force is slowly trickling away. And you wonder, what's wrong with me? Why am I not like them? Why does this thing that seems to enliven everyone else leave me feeling utterly depleted, exhausted, sometimes even a bit desperate to escape? Well, let me tell you something. There's nothing wrong with you. Nothing at all. What you're experiencing is not a deficiency or a flaw in your design. You're simply wired differently. And the world, in its infinite wisdom, created both kinds of beings for very good reasons. You see, we've been sold this idea that the extroverted way of being is the right way, the healthy way, the normal way. That if you're not energized by crowds, if you don't seek out constant stimulation and interaction, then something must be broken in you. But this is nonsense, complete and utter nonsense. It's like saying that because some flowers bloom in full sunlight, the ones that prefer shade are somehow defective. The universe expresses itself in infinite variety. Some creatures are nocturnal, some diurnal, some hunt in packs, others alone. And among humans, some of us are built to process the world internally, in depth, in silence and solitude. We're not lesser versions of extroverts. We're different instruments in the orchestra, playing different notes, and both are necessary for the symphony. Now, what's actually happening at these gatherings that leaves you so drained? Let me explain it to you, because once you understand the mechanism, you'll stop pathologizing yourself and start honoring your own nature. When you walk into a room full of people, your nervous system begins doing something quite extraordinary. It's reading the room, not just consciously, but at levels far below conscious awareness. You're picking up on tones of voice, facial micro-expressions, body language, the subtle emotional currents flowing between people. You're processing an enormous amount of data, far more than you realize. The extrovert in the room is doing something different. They're broadcasting. They're putting out energy, and they're getting energy back from the responses they receive. It's an exchange, you see. And for them it's energizing, because they're built for this kind of external processing. Their nervous system is designed to engage with the outer world in this direct, immediate way. But you're taking it all in. You're like a sponge, absorbing the emotional weather of the room. And here's the thing. You're not just observing it from a distance, you're actually feeling it. When someone in the room is anxious, you feel that anxiety in your own body. When there's tension between two people across the room, you sense it like a disturbance in the field. You're not just at the party, you're processing the party at a much deeper level. And this takes energy, tremendous energy. It's like the difference between watching a river from the shore and swimming in it. The extrovert is on the shore, watching, commenting, enjoying the view. You're in the water, feeling every current, every change in temperature, every bit of turbulence. Of course you're going to be tired afterward. You've been working, even though it doesn't look like work to the outside world. There's another aspect to this that's crucial to understand. Most social gatherings operate on a certain level of pretense. People are performing their social selves. They're not being authentic, not really. They're playing the game, wearing the mask, presenting the version of themselves that's acceptable, pleasant, appropriate. And for most people, this is fine. They can slip into the role quite easily, and they don't even notice they're doing it. But you notice. You notice the gap between what people are saying and what they're actually feeling. You notice the forced laughter, the polite lies, the conversations that are all surface and no substance. And this creates a kind of dissonance in you, a friction, because you can't quite participate in the pretense with the same ease. You want something real, something genuine, some actual connection beneath all the social choreography. And so you're caught. You're at this gathering, trying to play the game because that's what's expected, but simultaneously aware that it's a game. It's like being in a play where everyone else has forgotten their actors and thinks the stage is real life, and you're the only one who can still see the scenery for what it is. This awareness is exhausting. This double consciousness, being in the experience while simultaneously being aware of the artificiality of the experience, it takes a toll. Now, contrast this with what happens when you're alone. When you're alone, you can drop all the masks. You don't have to perform. You don't have to manage anyone else's emotional state or navigate complex social dynamics. You can just be. And in that being, in that simple, uncomplicated existence, there's a profound rest. The extrovert experiences being alone differently. For them, solitude can feel empty, understimulating. They need the external input, the interaction, the stimulation of other minds and personalities to feel fully alive. But for you, solitude is not deprivation, it's restoration. It's where you recharge. It's where you process all that input you've been absorbing, where you integrate your experiences, where you reconnect with yourself. This is why, after a gathering, you often need a significant recovery period. You're not just tired from staying up late or from the physical activity. You're tired because you've been processing vast amounts of subtle information, maintaining your social performance, managing the dissonance between authenticity and pretense, and absorbing the emotional field of everyone around you. You need time to discharge all of that, to let your nervous system settle, to return to your baseline. And here's what society doesn't tell you, what you need to understand in your bones. This is not a weakness. This is not something to be fixed or overcome. The depth of processing you're capable of, the sensitivity of your perception, these are gifts. Yes, they come with challenges. Yes, they make certain situations more difficult. But they also allow you to see things others miss, to understand at levels others cannot reach, to experience life with a richness and depth that the purely extroverted person may never know. The problem is not that you're drained by social gatherings. The problem is that we live in a society that has organized itself around extroverted values and then pathologized everyone who doesn't fit that mold. We've created a world where constant interaction is valued over deep reflection, where breadth of social connection is prized over depth of understanding, where being the life of the party is seen as superior to being the thoughtful observer in the corner. But think about what the world would lose if everyone was an extrovert. Who would do the deep thinking? Who would create the art, write the books, make the scientific discoveries that require long hours of solitary focus? Who would see the patterns that emerge only in quiet contemplation? Who would understand the subtle truths that reveal themselves only to those who know how to be still? The universe needs both. It needs the ones who are energized by interaction and the ones who are energized by solitude. It needs the broadcasters and the receivers. It needs those who skim along the surface of life and those who dive into the depths. Both are necessary. Both are valuable. Both are exactly as they should be. So when you find yourself at a gathering, feeling that familiar drain beginning, you can make a choice. You can honor your nature instead of fighting it. You can leave early without guilt. You can find the one or two people there who are capable of real conversation and spend your time with them rather than trying to work the whole room. You can take breaks, step outside, give yourself moments of quiet in the midst of the noise, and you can stop measuring yourself against the extroverts in the room. Stop thinking that their way of being is the right way and yours is the wrong way. They're playing their instrument, you're playing yours. Neither is better, they're just different notes in the same cosmic song. What you're experiencing at these gatherings is not pathology, it's sensitivity, it's depth. It's a particular way of processing reality that has its own wisdom, its own gifts, its own place in the grand scheme of things. The drain you feel is simply the cost of being built for depth in a world that often operates on the surface. But here's the beautiful thing. Once you truly accept this about yourself, once you stop trying to be something you're not, once you honor your need for solitude and limited social interaction, you'll find that the social interactions you do have become more meaningful, because you're no longer scattering your energy trying to be like everyone else. You're being yourself, and that authenticity attracts the kind of connections that actually nourish rather than drain you. You'll find your people. The other deep processors, the other ones who prefer one profound conversation to 10 superficial ones, the other ones who know that silence between two people can be more intimate than any words. And with these people, gathering won't feel like such a drain, because there's less pretense, less performance, more genuine meeting. So the next time you're at a gathering and you feel that drain beginning, remember this: you're not broken, you're not antisocial, you're not defective. You're a different kind of instrument, built for a different kind of music, and the world needs your music just as much as it needs the loud, bright songs of the extroverts. Honor your nature, protect your energy, and trust that being exactly who you are is not just okay, it's necessary.
There comes a moment in every human life when the very thing you depend on, the thing you've trusted since childhood, simply stops working, the mechanism of effort. You push and push, you try to hold yourself together, you devote yourself to improvement, to goals, to plans, to becoming someone you can be proud of, and one day, without warning, the whole engine seizes. Nothing responds, nothing moves. You work harder, thinking perhaps you miscalculated, perhaps you didn't give enough, perhaps you simply have to exert more force. But the more you push, the less life offers in return. It is a bewildering kind of silence. You reach out into life with both hands, and it feels as though the universe has quietly stepped back. You find yourself asking questions you thought you had outgrown. Why isn't this working? What am I missing? Why does it feel like I am doing everything and going nowhere? And beneath those questions is another one, far more frightening, but also far more honest. What if nothing I do is enough? Now, that is the moment where most people panic. They scramble. They tighten their grip. They look for new techniques, new hacks, new philosophies promising results. But all of that is simply more effort, more resistance, more of the same fuel that was already burning you out. You see, life has a very peculiar way of speaking when you're going too fast. It stops answering, not as a punishment, but as a way of getting your attention. You think effort is what moves life, but it is actually life that moves you. And when life wants you still, when it wants you quiet, when it wants you to finally hear what lies beneath the noise of your striving, it takes away the illusion of forward motion. You may interpret that as failure, but it is simply a pause, a sacred pause. You think you've been abandoned by momentum, but in truth you have only been returned to yourself. Just look at the world. Rivers do not rush every moment. Even the tides rest. The seasons linger before shifting. A tree does not strain upward each day. Growth comes in pulses, in breaths. Expansion, stillness. Expansion, stillness. But the human mind insists that stillness means something is wrong. It calls it stagnation. It calls it failure. And because the world keeps praising endless motion, you have come to believe that if you are not advancing, you are falling behind. But life is not linear. It never has been. It spirals, it circles, it pauses, it waits for the right conditions. If you look carefully at the times when nothing moved for you, you will see that they were shaping you in ways action never could. People ask, why am I trying so hard and seeing nothing? And the answer is very simple. Because the part of you doing the trying is not the part that is meant to move. There is a deeper intelligence in you, one that does not measure your worth by progress, one that does not calculate value based on effort. It is the same intelligence that grows your hair and heals your wounds and keeps your heart beating while you sleep. It does not need your effort. In fact, your effort often gets in its way. Think of someone drowning. Their instinct is to thrash, to claw at the water, to fight for control. But the harder they struggle, the faster they sink. Only when they stop fighting, when they allow themselves to float, does the water hold them up. In the same way, your effort can sometimes be the very thing pulling you under. You are trying to swim in places where you are meant to float. Now, that does not mean effort is wrong. Effort has its place. But when effort is fueled by fear, by desperation, by the need to prove something to yourself or to the world, it becomes a burden. You carry it like a weight, imagining it will deliver you to some distant shore where everything finally makes sense. But effort cannot deliver you to a place that already exists beneath your feet. There is a reason your effort led nowhere. Because the direction you were forcing yourself toward was never meant for you. If the door refuses to open, it is because there is nothing for you behind it. You may not see this now. You may think all your plans were sensible and well constructed. But the universe does not organize itself according to your expectations. It organizes itself according to resonance, according to timing, according to the unfolding of things that you cannot yet see. And when you push against that unfolding, the universe does not punish you. It simply waits. It waits for the moment you stop trying to bend life into the shape you prefer. It waits for the moment you surrender your insistence that you know what is best for you. It waits for the moment you are still enough to feel the movement of life itself. Because what feels like nowhere is not the absence of direction. It is the clearing of direction, the ground being leveled, the noise being softened, so that when life finally moves you, it moves you cleanly, effortlessly, without the friction of your resistance. Many people think the universe rewards effort, but look closely. The universe rewards alignment. Effort without alignment leads nowhere. Alignment without effort leads everywhere. You may not realize it, but the version of you that was pushing so hard no longer exists. Something in you is dying. Something in you is dissolving, not to hurt you, but to make space. The life that effort built is too small for who you are becoming. And life knows this. That is why it blocked you. That is why it held your progress still. You were reaching for a future that was beneath you. Now, none of this makes the moment easier. You wake up and it feels like your mind is foggy, your energy is heavy, your enthusiasm drained. It feels like failure because you have been trained to believe that constant striving is evidence of worth. But what if worth has nothing to do with striving? What if the universe is not measuring how hard you push, but how deeply you listen? You are not stuck. You are being emptied. And emptiness is not a mistake. It is preparation. When a bowl is full of old water, you cannot pour anything new into it. When a room is crowded, no one else can enter. When a path is cluttered, nothing can pass. Life clears you out so that something that actually belongs to you can take shape. But you must be still to see it. You must let the noise of your efforts settle. The modern world has made stillness feel shameful. People ask, what are you working on? What are you building? What are you producing? But no one asks, how deeply are you listening? How fully are you here? How much of yourself is aligned with your own experience? So when your effort leads nowhere, you think you've failed, but really you are being invited to rediscover a way of living that does not rely on exhaustion. A way of living that does not sacrifice the present for the illusion of a future. A way of living that trusts that life, not effort, is the thing that moves you. You are not in the wrong place. You are at the threshold. And thresholds never look like progress. They look like pauses. The universe is not withholding motion from you. It is preparing you for the kind of motion that will not break you. And if you stay with this moment long enough, something begins to shift. Not in the world around you, but in the felt sense of your own being. You start to notice that the tension you've carried for years begins to loosen. The constant background hum of urgency fades, even if only a little. You notice that you can breathe more deeply, even though nothing in your circumstances has changed. This is how the dissolution begins. First in the body, then in the mind, and only later in the life you live. You may not recognize it as movement, because you are looking for movement in the form of results. But the universe often moves you long before you see where it is taking you. You see, effort is loud. It demands. It insists. It clenches its fists and tightens its jaw. Effort says, I must get somewhere. I must achieve something. I must become someone. Effort is the voice of the self that believes it is separate from life, responsible for controlling every outcome, and so it exhausts itself. But life is quiet. Life whispers. Life waits. Life unfolds without strain. It breathes you. It beats your heart. It digests your food without asking your permission. Life does not struggle. Life simply moves. And when your effort leads nowhere, it is usually because life is trying to teach you its rhythm. It is trying to show you that the moment you stop forcing movement, a deeper movement begins. But the mind resists this. It says, if I stop trying, everything will collapse. But what if everything is collapsing precisely because you keep trying to hold together what you have outgrown, trying to push through doors that are no longer meant to open, trying to maintain an identity that is no longer true? There are seasons in your life when you are meant to build, seasons when you are meant to strive, seasons when effort flows easily because you are aligned with the direction of life. But there are also seasons when you are meant to unravel, seasons when effort becomes impossible because something softer, something wiser is asking to be heard. When all your effort leads nowhere, you are in such a season of undoing, a season of clearing, a season of returning to the ground of yourself. You may not realize it yet, but the nowhere you fear is actually the stillness from which true direction emerges. When you look at your life through the lens of the mind, you see stagnation, but through the lens of awareness, you see gestation. Something is forming in you, something you cannot name yet. It is not ambition, it is not desire, it is not a goal. It is a different orientation altogether. A way of relating to life that is not built on effort but on presence. Most people live their lives relying on effort because they have never experienced the intelligence of presence. They don't trust stillness because they never learned to listen. They were taught that life rewards productivity. They were taught that hard work guarantees results. But if you look carefully, you will see that the moments that shaped you the most were rarely the ones you worked hardest for. They were the moments that arrived quietly, unexpectedly, without effort. You did not effort your way into meeting the most important people in your life. You did not effort your way into the moments that changed your heart, the experiences that softened you, the realizations that awakened you. Those came on their own. They came because life brought them. So when effort stops working, it is because life wants to bring you something new, something you cannot arrive at through force, something that requires you to be softer, quieter, more honest with yourself, something that comes only when the mind finally grows tired of its endless pushing and falls into silence. And this silence, uncomfortable as it may be, is not emptiness, it is spaciousness. It is the clearing where truth appears. It is in this silence that you begin to see the difference between the life you were trained to chase and the life that actually belongs to you. You start to question the motives behind your striving. Was it truly for growth? Or was it to avoid feeling unworthy? Was it truly for joy? Or was it for validation? Was it truly aligned with your nature? Or was it aligned with the expectations of others? You may discover that much of your effort was never really yours. It was inherited from fears that were never examined. It was shaped by environments that rewarded burnout. It was fueled by a misunderstanding of what makes life meaningful. When that misunderstanding dissolves, effort falls away on its own, not because you stop caring, but because you stop pretending. You stop pretending that pushing yourself beyond your limits will lead to peace. You stop pretending that success will fill the places inside you that ache. You stop pretending that effort alone can save you from the fear of not being enough. And once you stop pretending, you can finally rest. This rest is not laziness. It is not giving up. It is not weakness. It is a return to sanity. It is a return to alignment. It is the moment when you stop swimming against the current of your own life. From the outside, it may look like nothing is happening, but inside, the landscape is changing. Your nervous system begins to unwind. Your thoughts begin to slow. Your breath deepens. The frantic momentum that once carried you begins to dissolve. You are not failing. You are recalibrating. And in this recalibration, you start to notice things you were too busy to see before. The texture of your own awareness, the subtle ways your intuition speaks, the places in your body that have been tight for years, the dreams you abandoned without even realizing you had, the person you became while trying to become someone else. All of this begins to surface. It is not chaos, it is clarity. The truth is that effort was distracting you from yourself. It kept you busy, occupied, forward-focused. It kept you from feeling the deeper longing within you, the longing to simply be, the longing to return to a life that is not constantly demanding something from you, the longing to let life move you instead of trying to drag life behind you. And so, effort stops working. Not because you are unworthy, not because you are unprepared, but because you are being guided into a different mode of living. One where effort is no longer your identity. One where your direction comes from a quiet inner knowing rather than external pressure. This is why the universe so often leads people into these moments of nowhere, not to punish them, but to soften them, not to stop their life, but to redirect it, not to take away their control, but to remind them that they never needed control to begin with. When you reach the point where effort collapses, you begin to encounter the truth that effort was never the real source of your growth. Growth happened in the moments when you were open, when you surrendered, when you let yourself be touched by something deeper than your goals. And that is where you are now, at the threshold between effort and awareness, between striving and being, between noise and silence, between the life you tried to control and the life you are meant to live. If you can allow yourself to rest here, even for a moment, you will begin to feel the faint stirrings of a new movement. It does not rush, it does not demand, it does not require you to force anything. It simply invites you to listen, and in that listening, you will discover that nowhere is not a dead end. It is a doorway, the doorway through which every real change in your life has ever entered. There is a strange and wonderful thing that happens when you begin to trust the doorway that looks like nowhere. At first you approach it cautiously, still believing that perhaps you are making some terrible mistake by allowing your effort to rest. You have been trained for so long to equate movement with meaning that stillness feels like a kind of death. But as you linger there, the mind softens, the body loosens, and the deeper intelligence within you begins to rise like something that has been waiting in the dark for years. It rises slowly, quietly, in the same way dawn approaches the horizon. It does not announce itself, it simply brightens. It reveals. And what it reveals is the space beneath your striving, the part of you that was never exhausted to begin with. There is an awareness in you that has watched your entire life unfold. It has observed your victories and your failures, your moments of clarity and your moments of confusion, your seasons of abundance and your seasons of collapse. It has never been tired because it has never been the one doing the striving. It has only been witnessing. When you arrive in this space, the first thing you feel is relief. Not the kind of relief that comes from solving a problem, but the kind that comes from no longer needing to solve it. You realize that the problem was never your lack of effort, but your reliance on effort. You had mistaken force for intelligence, striving for direction, exhaustion for achievement. And the moment you recognize this, a great exhale moves through your entire being. Life becomes softer. The air feels different. You begin to sense that you are not trudging through a hostile universe, but participating in a movement that has always been supporting you, even when you were resisting it. This is the first quiet shift, the recognition that you are not lost. You were simply moving too quickly to feel the hands that were guiding you. You may think this realization brings immediate peace, but peace is not the first gift. The first gift is honesty, a profound honesty that rises from your chest like a tide that can no longer be pushed back. You begin to see the truth of your exhaustion, the truth of your longing, the truth of the life you have been carrying on your shoulders. And as these truths surface, they do not hurt you, they free you. You realize you have been exhausting yourself with expectations that were never aligned with your nature. You realize you have been chasing a version of yourself that was shaped more by fear than by authenticity. You realize that much of your striving came from the belief that you needed to become extraordinary, to be worthy of rest, of love, of belonging. And when this breaks open inside you, something remarkable happens. You stop running. Not because you have nowhere left to go, but because you finally see that the running never brought you closer to anything real. It only brought you deeper into the maze of your own mind. A maze filled with ideals, standards, comparisons, imagined futures, and old wounds disguised as ambition. You were not navigating life. You were navigating your conditioning. And conditioning does not lead forward. It only loops. This is why effort led nowhere, because you were running in circles that only felt like progress. The universe is too kind to let you waste your life in a maze, so it closed the doors that kept you spinning. It exhausted the strategies that no longer served you. It silenced the paths that were fueled by fear, not to punish you, but to liberate you. And liberation begins with stillness. Once you allow this stillness, even reluctantly, life begins to reorganize you from the inside out. It starts gently, like a whisper in the back of your awareness. You notice you are less interested in proving yourself. You notice you are less reactive to the pressures around you. You notice that the urge to force things weakens. You begin to see that you don't need to control life for life to move. It is here that you begin to learn the art of allowing. Allowing does not mean passivity. It does not mean giving up. It means listening. It means recognizing that every movement in life has a rhythm, and that rhythm cannot be rushed. If you push a seed too quickly, it dies. If you force a flower open, it collapses. If you try to make the ocean still, it churns. The nature of things must be honored, and you are part of nature. So when your effort leads nowhere, it is often because you were pushing yourself beyond the rhythm of your own becoming. You were demanding a harvest in the middle of winter. You were insisting on clarity during a season meant for undoing. You were looking for answers in a moment meant for silence. Life knows the rhythm even when you do not. And this is why surrender becomes the second gift. Not surrender to failure, but surrender to the deeper intelligence that is orchestrating your life. A surrender that feels less like giving up and more like being carried. As you settle into this surrender, a new form of strength emerges in you. Not the strength of tension, but the strength of openness. Not the strength of endurance, but the strength of awareness. You begin to notice that you can hold your experience more fully without collapsing under it. You realize that life has always been easier when you are not clutching at it. The mind may protest, saying you must be vigilant, you must plan, you must control, you must do something. But you begin to see that much of what the mind calls control is simply fear wearing a helpful mask. Control has exhausted you for years. Control has kept you in the maze. Control has convinced you that the world is unpredictable and that your safety depends on constant effort. But safety does not come from control. Safety comes from trust, from awareness, from presence, from the understanding that you are not navigating life alone. Life is navigating you. As this understanding deepens, your relationship with yourself changes in subtle but powerful ways. You no longer judge yourself for being tired. You no longer shame yourself for not knowing the next step. You no longer criticize yourself for pausing. Instead, you begin to treat yourself with the gentleness that life has been trying to teach you. You become less interested in rushing, less interested in proving, less interested in perfection, more interested in honesty, more interested in ease, more interested in alignment. This is the beginning of authentic living. You start to notice what drains you and what nourishes you. You start to choose rest without guilt. You start to slow down enough to hear your own intuition, which has been speaking to you all these years, but could not be heard over the noise of your effort. It is in this slowing that life begins to reveal its next direction. Not through pressure, but through pull. Not through force, but through resonance. You feel drawn to things that once seemed unimportant. You find clarity in moments that once felt quiet. You notice openings that were invisible when you were rushing past them. This is how life guides you. Gently, subtly, consistently, and as you follow this pull, something miraculous begins to happen. The movement you have been waiting for returns, but it does not come with strain. It comes with grace. Suddenly, the path that once felt blocked begins to open. Opportunities that once seemed impossible appear naturally. People who resonate with your new way of being begin to enter your life. Conversations align. Timing aligns. Energy aligns. Movement returns. Not because you forced it, but because you became aligned with it. Your life begins to expand again, but now from the inside out, you are not chasing the world, you are meeting it. You begin to realize that the pauses in your life were not interruptions, they were recalibrations. They were the universe adjusting your direction. They were the moments when life was saving you from futures that did not belong to you. Every period where effort led nowhere was a moment where you were being redirected toward a place where effort would be unnecessary. Because alignment does not require force. It requires presence. You may think you lost time in those seasons, but what you lost was not time. What you lost was the illusion that you could control your way into peace, and what you gained was far greater. You gained the ability to listen. You gained the capacity to feel. You gained the clarity to recognize what is truly meant for you. When you look back, you will see that the times when your effort failed were the very times when your life was protecting you from paths you were forcing yourself into, protecting you from versions of yourself you no longer needed to become, protecting you from directions that would have drained you even further. You were not failing. you were being held, and now you stand in a different kind of space. A space where life no longer feels like something you must conquer, but something you can participate in. A space where your worth is not tied to productivity. A space where you can meet yourself without judgment. A space where you can rest without apology. From this space, effort becomes something new. It becomes an expression of alignment rather than a compensation for fear. You act when moved, not when pressured. You move when guided, not when panicked. You work from fullness, not from depletion. Life begins to feel lighter, more fluid, more honest. It becomes less about achieving and more about unfolding, less about getting somewhere and more about being here. The weight you carried for years lifts, not because you accomplished something extraordinary, but because you stopped arguing with the rhythm of your own becoming. When all your effort leads nowhere, it is because you are being led somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter, somewhere more real, somewhere your mind could not lead you because your mind is trained to repeat the past. Awareness is what moves you into the future. This is the gift hidden inside exhaustion, the return to what has always been guiding you, the return to the intelligence that does not strain, the return to the part of you that is already whole. You were never meant to live your life struggling upstream. You were meant to flow with the current of your own truth. You were meant to follow the quiet pull of the life that is aligned with your nature. You were meant to allow what is real to rise and allow what is false to fall away. You have spent so long trying to become someone worthy, not realizing that the worthiness was already there beneath the layers of effort. And when effort collapses, you are finally able to feel it. This is why life stops you. This is why effort fails. This is why you find yourself in seasons of stillness. Not because you are unworthy of movement, but because you are being prepared for a different kind of movement. A movement that does not exhaust you, but expresses you. A movement that does not pull you away from yourself, but brings you deeper into the heart of your own life. The greatest transformation of your life will not come from striving, it will come from listening. And now, after everything has collapsed, after all the doors have refused to open, after the exhaustion has stripped you bare, you are finally quiet enough to hear. And what you hear is this. You were never meant to force your way through life. You were meant to fall into alignment with it. And once you do, everything that once felt unreachable begins to unfold naturally. Not because you worked harder, but because you stopped resisting the truth of who you are. This is what happens when all your effort leads nowhere. It is the beginning of the life that is actually yours.
It's a strange game we play. We spend our lives trying to repair ourselves, as if we were somehow damaged, forever polishing the mask we show the world. And yet, if you look closely at the great figures of history, the ones who actually changed things, who actually lived, you'll notice something peculiar. They were all cracked, every single one of them, broken in some way. And it wasn't despite their brokenness that they became who they were. It was because of it. Now, this goes against everything we've been taught, doesn't it? We're told to hide our wounds, to cover our scars, to pretend that we have it all together. But what if I told you that your very brokenness, the thing you're most ashamed of, is precisely what the universe needs from you? What if the crack in your character is not a flaw, but a feature? Let me be very clear about something from the start. When I say damaged, I'm not talking about someone who is careless or irresponsible, or who uses their pain as an excuse. No. I'm talking about the person who has been to the edge, who has looked into the darkness of their own soul and come back trembling. I'm talking about the person who knows, really knows, that they are not self-sufficient, that they cannot do this thing called life on their own. These are the people the universe chooses, not because they are weak, but because they are awake. You see, the universe has no use for the self-made man. That fellow who struts around, believing he pulled himself up by his own bootstraps, who thinks his success is entirely his own doing, he's a closed system. There's no space for anything greater to work through him, because he's already filled to the brim with himself. But the damaged person, the broken one, they have cracks, and through those cracks, light gets in. Think about water for a moment. If you have a perfectly sealed container, water cannot enter. But if there's a crack, the tiniest opening, water finds its way in. It seeps through. It fills the space. This is how grace works. This is how the power of existence itself works. It cannot enter where there is no opening. And damage creates openings. Now I want you to understand something very important here. Being damaged is not the same as being destroyed. A cup with a crack can still hold water. A window with a chip can still let in light. In fact, sometimes that chip creates the most beautiful patterns when the sun hits it just right. Your damage is like this. It doesn't disqualify you from being used by life. It qualifies you. Look at the great spiritual figures throughout history. Moses, they say, had a speech impediment. He could barely talk, and yet he was chosen to be the voice of God to his people. How absurd is that? The universe picks a man who cannot speak properly to deliver the most important message in history. Why? Because Moses knew he couldn't do it alone. He knew he needed help. He knew he was insufficient. And in that knowing, he became a perfect vessel. Or consider David, a small shepherd boy overlooked by his own family, considered too young, too weak, too insignificant. And yet it was precisely this David, this damaged goods in the eyes of society, who became the great king. Because David never forgot where he came from. He never forgot his smallness. Even when he wore a crown, he remembered he was just a shepherd boy who the universe had picked up and used. The pattern is everywhere once you start looking for it. Paul, the great apostle, was a murderer. He hunted down and killed the very people whose cause he would later champion. Can you imagine the weight of that? The knowledge that you destroyed the lives of those you now claim to serve? And yet, it was this very guilt, this very awareness of his own capacity for evil, that made him such a powerful teacher. He knew he was saved not by his own goodness, but by something far beyond himself. Here's what happens when you're damaged. You lose the illusion of control. You realize you're not running the show. Most people walk through life believing they're in charge. That if they just work hard enough, plan well enough, be good enough, everything will turn out fine. But the damaged person knows better. They've seen how quickly everything can fall apart. They've felt the ground give way beneath their feet. And in that terrible moment of falling, they learn something the comfortable never learn. They learn to trust what catches them. This is why the universe chooses damaged people. Because they've learned to let go. They've learned to relax into life rather than trying to grip it with white knuckles. Have you ever tried to float in water? If you tense up, if you try to control every movement, you sink. But if you relax, if you trust the water, it holds you. Life is exactly like this. The damaged person has learned to float. Now let me tell you what damage really is. It's not the thing that happened to you. It's not the addiction, the abuse, the failure, the loss. Those are just events. Damage is what happens inside you when you finally admit that those events changed you, that you're not the same person you were before, that you cannot go back to who you were. This admission, this acknowledgement of change, this is what creates the crack through which light enters. Most people, when something terrible happens, they spend all their energy trying to go back to normal. They want to return to who they were before. But the damaged person realizes there is no going back. The old self is gone. And in the space where the old self used to be, something new can grow. Something that wasn't possible before. This is not recovery. This is transformation. And transformation is what the universe is after. You know what's fascinating? The people who have never been broken often have the hardest time with life. They're brittle. When something difficult comes along, they shatter because they've never learned to bend. But the person who has already been broken, who has already been bent out of shape, they have a kind of flexibility. They can move with life's changes rather than resisting them. They're like old wood that has weathered many storms. Strong not because it's rigid, but because it knows how to sway. I want to tell you about something that happens when you accept your damage. You become humble. You realize you're not the star of the show. You're not even the director. You're just one small part of an enormous production. And this realization, far from being depressing, is actually tremendously liberating. Because when you know you're not in charge, you can stop trying to control everything. You can stop exhausting yourself trying to manage every outcome. You can simply do your part and let the rest unfold as it will. This is what the ancient Chinese called Wu Wei, effortless action. Not doing nothing, but doing without straining, working without forcing. And you can only do this when you've been humbled by your own limitations. The proud man, the one who thinks he has it all together, he's always fighting. Fighting against circumstances, fighting against other people, fighting against life itself. He's in a constant state of resistance. But resistance is exhausting. The damaged person has learned that resistance is futile. Not in a defeatist way, but in a deeply accepting way. They've learned to work with life rather than against it. Here's something else that happens when you're damaged. You develop compassion, real compassion. Not the fake kind where you look down on others and feel sorry for them, but the kind where you recognize yourself in everyone you meet. Because you know what it's like to struggle, to fail, to be at the end of your rope. You know what it's like to need help. And this knowing makes you gentle with others in a way that the undamaged can never be. The person who has never really suffered often judges those who are suffering. They think, why don't they just pull themselves together? Why don't they just try harder? But the damaged person knows it's not that simple. They know that sometimes trying harder is exactly the wrong thing to do. Sometimes you have to stop trying and simply surrender. And this knowledge, born of personal experience, makes them able to help others in ways the comfortable never could. Now, I need to say something about what damage is not. Damage is not an excuse. It's not a reason to give up, or to wallow in self-pity, or to treat others badly. If your damage has made you bitter, resentful, cruel, then you've missed the lesson. You've taken your pain and turned it inward or outward as poison, rather than allowing it to crack you open. The difference between the person the universe can use and the person it cannot is this. One person looks at their damage and says, why me? This is unfair. I am cursed. The other person looks at their damage and says, what is this trying to teach me? How is this making me more human? What am I supposed to learn from this? Both are damaged, but only one is becoming wise. There's a story I love about a man who goes to see a teacher. He says, Master, I have so many problems. I am anxious. I am depressed. I have addictions. I have failed at everything I've tried. How can I possibly be of any use? And the teacher says, you have just listed your qualifications. The man is confused. And the teacher explains, your anxiety has taught you that life is uncertain. Your depression has taught you that happiness cannot be forced. Your addictions have taught you that you need help. Your failures have taught you humility. These are not disqualifications. These are your credentials. This is what I mean when I say the universe chooses damaged people. It's not that it looks for people who are broken and says, oh, let me use them. It's that brokenness creates the conditions necessary for something greater to work through you. It's like how a seed must break open before it can become a plant. The seed that stays intact, perfectly sealed, perfect in its seedness, will never grow. And what emerges from that crack is not the old you, perfectly restored. It's something entirely new. Something that was always waiting inside you, but could never come out, because the shell was too hard. Now with the shell cracked, it can finally emerge. Let me tell you what I've observed. The people who change the world are never the ones who had it easy. They're the ones who struggled, who failed, who fell down and got back up so many times they lost count. Why? Because struggle teaches you things that comfort never can. It teaches you that you're stronger than you thought. It teaches you that you can survive what you thought would destroy you. It teaches you that there's something in you, or working through you, that is greater than your circumstances. And here's the beautiful part. Once you've learned this, once you've really learned it in your bones, you become fearless. Not fearless in the sense that you're never afraid, but fearless in the sense that you know fear is just a feeling, and feeling's past. You know that even if the worst happens, you'll be okay, because you've already survived the worst, or something close to it, and you're still here. This is the great secret of damaged people. Free to take risks, free to speak truth, free to love without holding back, because they know that holding back doesn't protect you anyway. I want you to think about this for a moment. Who would you rather learn from? Someone who has never failed, who has always succeeded at everything they tried, who has never known real suffering, or someone who has fallen flat on their face, who has known despair, who has clawed their way back from the edge. The first person can tell you about success, but the second person can tell you about life. The universe chooses damaged people because they have wisdom that the comfortable don't have. They've been refined by fire. They've had the unnecessary burned away. What remains is essential, true, real. And this is what the universe needs. Not people who are perfect, but people who are real. Now here's where it gets really interesting. When you accept your damage, when you stop trying to hide it or fix it or pretend it's not there, something magical happens. Other people see it, and they recognize themselves in you. Your damage becomes a bridge, a way for others to cross from their isolation into connection, because everyone is damaged in some way. Everyone has wounds they're trying to hide. But when you stop hiding yours, you give others permission to stop hiding theirs. This is how healing happens. Not through pretending to be whole, but through admitting you're broken. Not through presenting a perfect image, but through showing your scars, your willingness to be vulnerable, to be seen in your damage. This is what allows others to be vulnerable too. And in that mutual vulnerability, something beautiful happens. Connection. Real, deep, human connection. The universe doesn't choose damaged people to do its work. Despite their damage, it chooses them because of it. Because damage creates humility. Humility creates openness. Openness creates space. And in that space, something greater can work. Call it God. Call it the universe. Call it the power of life itself. Whatever you call it, it needs space to work, and damage creates that space. So if you're sitting there thinking, I'm too broken to be of any use, I'm too damaged to matter, I've made too many mistakes, let me tell you something. You're exactly who the universe is looking for. Your brokenness is not a bug, it's a feature. Your damage is not a disqualification, it's your credential. Your wounds are not shameful secrets. They're badges of honor that say, I have lived, I have suffered, I have learned, and I am still here. The universe doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more real ones. It doesn't need more people who have it all together. It needs more people who are willing to fall apart and be put back together in a new way. It doesn't need more people pretending to be strong. It needs more people who know they're weak, and let something stronger work through them. This is the great paradox. Power is made perfect in weakness, not despite weakness, but in it, through it, by means of it. The very thing you think disqualifies you is what qualifies you. The very wound you're trying to hide is the door through which light can enter. The very damage you're ashamed of is the crack through which grace flows. So stop trying to fix yourself. Stop trying to present a perfect image. Stop pretending you have it all together. Instead, be honest about your damage, acknowledge your brokenness, admit your need for help. And then, in that moment of honest vulnerability, you'll discover something amazing. You're not alone. You've never been alone. And the very damage you thought made you unusable is what makes you perfect for what the universe needs you to do. And the best vessels are the ones that have been broken and put back together. They're the ones that know they're just containers, not the thing contained. They're the ones that let light pass through them, because they're full of cracks. And that light, that power, that grace, it shines all the brighter because of those cracks. So be damaged, be broken. You know, there's something quite extraordinary about the way we construct our sense of self. From the moment we begin to develop self-awareness as children, we start telling ourselves stories about who we are. And these stories, these narratives about our identity, become so deeply embedded, so thoroughly believed, that we never think to question them. We take them as absolute truth, as unchangeable facts about our nature. But here's what I want to suggest to you today. The most fundamental stories you tell yourself about who you are, the bedrock assumptions upon which you've built your entire sense of identity, are lies. Not malicious lies, not deliberate deceptions, but profound misunderstandings about the nature of your being. And these three lies, these three fundamental illusions, keep you trapped in patterns of suffering, limitation, and endless seeking. The extraordinary thing is that everyone believes these same three lies. They're universal delusions, passed down through culture, reinforced by society, embedded in language itself. And until you see through them, until you recognize them as the fictions they are, you remain imprisoned by them, living a life that's fundamentally based on falsehood. So let me tell you about these three lies. And as I describe them, I want you to watch your own reaction. Because the ego, the false self that's built on these lies, will immediately try to defend them. It will say, no, these aren't lies, this is just how things are. This is reality. And that defensive reaction is itself evidence of how deeply these lies have been believed. The first lie, and this is the foundation upon which the other two rest, is the lie that you are separate, that you are an isolated entity, a separate self, fundamentally divided from everything else that exists. You believe you are in here, behind your eyes, inside your skin, and the world is out there, separate from you, something you observe and interact with, but are fundamentally apart from. Now, on the surface, this seems obvious, doesn't it? Of course you're separate. You have your own body, your own thoughts, your own experiences. When you feel pain, others don't feel it. When you think, others don't hear your thoughts. The boundary of your skin seems to clearly mark where you end and not you begins. How could this possibly be a lie? But let me ask you something. Where exactly do you end and the rest of the universe begins? You might say at your skin, but your skin is constantly exchanging molecules with the air. You're breathing in oxygen that was produced by trees, breathing out carbon dioxide that trees will use. The atoms in your body right now were once part of stars, part of the earth, part of countless other organisms. The food you ate yesterday is literally becoming you today. The bacteria in your gut, without which you couldn't survive, are they part of you or separate from you? You see, the boundary is completely arbitrary. It's a convention, a useful fiction, but not an actual division in reality. You are not a separate thing interacting with the universe. You are what the entire universe is doing at the point called here and now. Just as a wave is not separate from the ocean, but is the ocean waving, you are not separate from existence, but are existence expressing itself in this particular form at this particular location, in this particular moment. But we've been conditioned from the earliest age to believe in separation. We're given a name, and we start to identify with that name as if it's what we are. We're told you and me and them, and language itself reinforces the illusion of separation with every sentence. We're taught to see ourselves as separate individuals, competing with other separate individuals for resources, for success, for love, for survival. And this lie of separation is the root of almost all suffering. Because when you believe you're separate, you're constantly defending your territory, protecting your interests, trying to get what you need from a world that seems foreign to you. You experience loneliness because you believe you're genuinely isolated. You experience fear because you're vulnerable, a small separate thing in a vast universe that doesn't care about you. You experience alienation because you never quite feel at home in a world you think you're separate from. But the moment you see through this lie, everything changes. Not because you gain something new, but because you lose an old illusion. You realize you've never been separate. You've never been alone. You've never been isolated. You are the universe experiencing itself. You are existence knowing itself. The division was imaginary. The separation was a story. And without that story, what remains is a sense of profound connection, of being at home everywhere, of belonging to everything. Now, the second lie builds directly on the first. This is the lie that you are consistent, that there's a continuous, unchanging you that persists through time. You believe there's a stable self, a constant identity that was there when you were 5 years old, is here now, and will be there when you're 80. You think of yourself as a thing, a noun, an entity that endures through all the changes of life. But is this actually true? Are you the same person you were 10 years ago? Are your thoughts the same? Your beliefs? Your body? Every cell in your body has been replaced multiple times over. Your opinions have changed. Your preferences have evolved. Your memories of your past have been rewritten countless times. So where is this continuous self? What you call yourself is actually a process, not a thing. It's a verb, not a noun. You are not a being, you are being. You're not a self, you're selfing. There's a continuous flow of experience, of sensation, of thought, of feeling, but there's no solid, unchanging entity having these experiences. There's just the experiencing itself. Think about it this way. When you look at a river, you give it a name. You call it the Mississippi or the Thames or the Ganges. But is it really the same river from moment to moment? The water that's flowing past you now will be miles away in an hour. New water is constantly flowing in. The river is never the same from one moment to the next. And yet we speak of it as if it's a single, continuous thing. You are like that river. You're a flowing process of thoughts, sensations, experiences, constantly changing, never the same from moment to moment. But you've been taught to think of yourself as a thing, as a solid entity, as a consistent self. And this lie creates enormous problems, because when you believe you're a fixed self, you become attached to particular ideas about who you are. You say, I am this kind of person. I am not that kind of person. And these definitions become a prison. You can't change, can't grow, can't become something new, because that would threaten your sense of identity. You have to defend who you think you are against any evidence that contradicts it. Moreover, this lie creates the illusion that you're in control of yourself. You think there's a you, a central controller, a captain of the ship, making decisions and running the show. But if you observe carefully, you'll notice that thoughts arise on their own. Feelings happen. Decisions emerge from conditions you didn't choose. There is no separate controller. There's just the process happening. And then thought comes in afterward and claims credit for it, saying, I did that, I thought that, I decided that. When you see through this second lie, when you recognize that you're a process rather than a thing, there's an incredible freedom. You're no longer trapped by outdated ideas about who you are. You're no longer burdened by the need to defend a consistent self-image. You're free to change, to flow, to be different in different circumstances. You realize you're not playing a fixed character in the drama of life. You're the drama itself, constantly improvising, constantly new. And now we come to the third lie, and this one is perhaps the most insidious. This is the lie that you are inadequate, that there's something wrong with you, that you need to become someone or something other than what you are, to be acceptable, to be worthy, to be complete. This lie is woven into the very fabric of our civilization. From the moment you're born, you're being measured, evaluated, judged. Are you developing properly? Are you meeting the milestones? Are you good enough? Smart enough? Attractive enough? Successful enough? The message is constant and clear. As you are right now, you're not quite right. You need to improve, to achieve, to become better. The entire economy runs on this lie. Advertising works by creating a sense of lack. You're not attractive enough, but buy this product and you will be. You're not successful enough, but get this degree, this job, this house, and you will be. You're not happy enough, but consume this experience, this substance, this entertainment, and you will be. The underlying message is always the same. You are not okay as you are, but if you do this or acquire that, then you'll finally be acceptable. Religion often reinforces this lie in different clothing. You're a sinner, you're fallen, you're separate from the divine, but if you follow these rules, perform these rituals, believe these doctrines, then you might become worthy. Even much of what passes for spirituality today is based on this same lie. You're not enlightened, you're not awakened, you're not conscious enough. But if you meditate enough, practice enough, purify enough, then you might finally become what you should be. But here's the truth that nobody wants you to know. You are already complete. You are already whole. There is nothing wrong with you. There never has been. The sense of inadequacy, the feeling that something is missing, the belief that you need to become something other than what you are, this is the lie. It's a fiction that's been implanted in you by a society that needs you to feel inadequate, so you'll keep striving, keep consuming, keep chasing. Now, I can already hear the objection. You might say, but I do have problems. I do have issues I need to work on. I do need to grow and improve. How can you say there's nothing wrong with me? And this is where we have to be very careful to understand what I'm actually saying. I'm not saying you can't learn new skills. I'm not saying you shouldn't address harmful behaviors. I'm not saying growth and development don't happen. What I'm saying is that at the fundamental level of your being, at the core of what you actually are, there is no inadequacy. The sense that you're fundamentally flawed, that at your core you're not good enough, this is the lie. You are an expression of existence itself. You are what the universe is doing right here, right now. And existence doesn't make mistakes. A tree doesn't worry that it's not a good enough tree. A river doesn't feel inadequate about its flowing. A bird doesn't doubt its worth. They simply are what they are, completely, fully, without self-consciousness or self-doubt. But human beings have developed this peculiar capacity for self-reflection, and we've used it to create an idea of what we should be, and then we've compared our actual experience to this idea, and we found ourselves wanting. We've created an ideal self, a perfect version we think we should be, and then we've felt bad about not being that. But the ideal is imaginary. It's a concept. It's not real. What's real is what you actually are in this moment. And what you actually are is the universe experiencing itself in human form. You are existence knowing itself. You are life living itself. And that is already completely sufficient, completely whole, completely acceptable. Not because you've achieved something, not because you've earned it, but because that's simply what is. When you see through this third lie, when you recognize that the sense of inadequacy is just a story you've been told and have believed, something remarkable happens. You stop the endless striving to become acceptable. You stop postponing your okayness until some future achievement. You recognize that you're already it. You've always been it. You couldn't be anything else. And paradoxically, when you stop trying to improve yourself to become acceptable, when you stop operating from a fundamental sense of lack, that's when real growth becomes possible. Not growth driven by fear and inadequacy, but growth that happens naturally, organically, like a plant growing toward the sun. Not because the seed is inadequate, but because growth is what life does. Now, here's what's important to understand about these three lies. They're interconnected. They support each other. The lie of separation makes you feel isolated and vulnerable. The lie of being a fixed self makes you rigid and defensive. The lie of inadequacy makes you constantly chase after something you think you lack. Together, they create a false sense of identity, what we might call the ego, that's constantly struggling, constantly defending, constantly seeking. And this false self, this ego, built on lies, consumes enormous amounts of energy. It requires constant maintenance, constant reinforcement, constant protection. You have to defend your separateness, maintain your self-image, prove your adequacy. It's exhausting. It's like trying to dam a river. The natural flow of life is wholeness, change, and completeness. But you're constantly expending energy to maintain the illusions of separation, fixity, and lack. But you can't simply decide to stop believing these lies. The ego can't enlighten itself. The false self can't see through its own falsehood. What's required is a different kind of seeing, a shift in awareness that happens not through effort but through relaxation, not through becoming but through recognizing what already is. This is why all the great spiritual traditions, beneath their different forms and languages, point at the same thing. They're all inviting you to see through these fundamental lies. The Buddhist talks about the illusion of the separate self. The Hindu speaks of recognizing your identity with Brahman, with all that is. The Taoist describes flowing with the way things are rather than fighting against life. Jesus spoke of dying to be reborn, of losing your life to find it. They're all pointing at the same recognition. These stories you've believed about yourself, these fundamental assumptions about your nature are not true. And when these lies are seen through, when these illusions dissolve, what remains? Not nothing, not some void or blank emptiness. What remains is what was always there beneath the lies. Simple presence, pure awareness, being itself. You don't become something special. You recognize what you've always been. You don't achieve some extraordinary state. You wake up to the ordinary reality that was hidden by extraordinary delusions. Let me be very practical about this. How do these lies operate in your daily life, and how does seeing through them change your experience? Take the lie of separation. When you believe you're separate, every interaction is a transaction between isolated entities. Relationships become negotiations. You're trying to get what you need from others while protecting yourself from being hurt. There's always this subtle guardedness, this sense of being on one side of a boundary while everyone else is on the other side. But when you see through the lie of separation, relationships transform. You recognize that you're meeting yourself in different forms. The boundary between self and other becomes transparent. There's still the appearance of separateness, still different bodies and personalities, but there's an underlying recognition of unity. Compassion becomes natural because hurting another is recognized as hurting yourself. Love stops being about getting something from someone and becomes about recognizing what you share. Consider the lie of being a fixed self. When you believe you're a consistent, unchanging entity, you become rigid. You have to defend your self-image, your reputation, your identity. If someone criticizes you, it threatens who you think you are. If circumstances change, you resist because it threatens your stability. You're constantly trying to control life to protect this imaginary stable self. But when you see through this lie, there's incredible flexibility. You can be different in different situations without feeling like you're being false. You can change your mind without feeling like you're betraying yourself. You can accept criticism without it devastating you because you're not identified with a fixed self that could be damaged. You become like water, taking the shape of whatever container you're in, yet always remaining essentially water. And the lie of inadequacy, this one affects every aspect of your life. When you believe you're fundamentally lacking, you're always striving, always seeking, always trying to fill the void. You pursue achievements hoping they'll make you feel worthy. You chase experiences hoping they'll make you feel fulfilled. You seek approval from others hoping it will validate your existence. But nothing ever quite works because you're trying to fill an imaginary hole. When you see through this lie, the striving stops. Not because you become lazy or passive, but because the desperate quality drops away. You still take action, still have preferences, still pursue things, but not from a place of lack. There's a sense of already being fulfilled, and actions arise from that fullness rather than from trying to fill an emptiness. Life becomes play rather than struggle. Now I want to address something important. You might be listening to all this and thinking, okay, I understand intellectually, I can see how these might be lies, but I still experience myself as separate, as a continuous self, as inadequate. How do I stop believing these lies? And this is the crucial point. You can't stop believing them through an act of will. You can't think your way out of these lies. Intellectual understanding is not the same as seeing through the illusion. It's like someone describing to you that the earth is round when you're standing on flat ground. You might accept it intellectually, but your direct experience still shows you flatness. What's needed is a different kind of looking. Not thinking about these things, but observing directly. Not believing new ideas about yourself, but questioning the old ones. Not trying to become awakened, but investigating whether you're already awake and just haven't noticed. Start with the simplest observation. Right now, in this moment, are you actually experiencing separation, or are you experiencing a unified field of awareness in which thoughts, sensations, and perceptions appear? Don't think about it. Just look. Is there actually a separate you experiencing these things, or is there just experiencing happening? Look at this thing you call yourself. Can you actually find it? Where is it? Is it your body, but your body is constantly changing? Is it your thoughts, but thoughts come and go? Is it your memories, but memories are constantly being revised? What is this self you're so sure exists as a continuous entity? And this sense of inadequacy, where does it come from? Is it actually in your direct experience right now? Or is it a thought about yourself, a story you're telling, a comparison you're making? When you're fully absorbed in something, when you're completely present, is there any sense of inadequacy? Or does that only appear when you step back and start evaluating yourself? This investigation is not about reaching a conclusion. It's about looking so directly at your experience that the lies become obvious. It's like looking at an optical illusion. Once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. You might still see the illusion, but you're no longer fooled by it. And here's the beautiful thing. You don't have to figure all this out. You don't have to become someone who has seen through the lies. The seeing happens on its own when the conditions are right. Your job is not to achieve some state of enlightenment. Your job is to stop reinforcing the lies, to stop compulsively thinking thoughts that maintain the illusion of separation, fixity, and inadequacy. Every time you notice yourself defending your separate identity, pause. Every time you catch yourself trying to maintain a consistent self-image, pause. Every time you feel that fundamental sense of not being enough, pause. Don't try to change anything. Just notice. Just see what's actually happening. Because the lies are maintained by unconsciousness. They persist because you believe them without questioning. But the moment you bring awareness to them, the moment you actually look directly at the assumption rather than through it, something shifts. Not because you've done something, but because light has been shone on what was hidden in darkness. This is why all the great spiritual teachings emphasize presence, awareness, consciousness. Not as something to achieve, but as something to recognize. You are already aware. You are already conscious. You are already present. But you've been so focused on the content of awareness, so caught up in the story, that you've forgotten the awareness itself. And awareness is what you actually are. Not the objects of awareness, not the thoughts and feelings and sensations, but the awareness in which all of these appear. And awareness is not separate. It's not a fixed thing. It's not inadequate. These qualities belong to the objects appearing in awareness, not to awareness itself. When you rest as awareness rather than as the character in the story, the three lies are seen through naturally. There's no separation because awareness is the space in which everything appears. There's no fixed self because awareness is not a thing, but the capacity for things to appear. There's no inadequacy, because awareness lacks nothing. It's already the fullness in which everything exists. I want to be very clear. I'm not asking you to believe any of this. Don't take my word for it. Don't make this into a new set of beliefs to replace the old ones. That would just be substituting one lie for another. Instead, investigate. Look at your own experience. Question the assumptions you've been operating under your entire life. The three lies everyone believes about themselves, separation, fixity, and inadequacy, are not your personal failing. They're part of the human condition. They're built into the structure of thought and language. Everyone is subject to them until they're seen through, so there's no blame, no fault. There's simply the possibility of waking up from the dream, of seeing through the story, of recognizing what you've always been beneath the layers of belief. And when that recognition happens, life doesn't stop. You don't float off into some detached state. The person continues, the body continues, the mind continues, but the identification shifts. You're no longer imprisoned by the false sense of self. You're free to be human without believing you're only human. Free to have an identity without being trapped by it. Free to engage with life without the desperate quality that comes from believing you're inadequate. This is the liberation that's available to every human being. Not some special state for special people. Simply the recognition of what's always been true, hidden beneath the...
There comes a peculiar moment in one's life when joy simply vanishes. Not suddenly, like a door slamming shut, but gradually, like a room dimming without anyone touching the lights. You look around and everything is technically the same. The people you used to laugh with are still there. The hobbies you loved still exist. The world has not changed its shape. And yet, you feel as though something essential has slipped quietly out of your hands. You wake up and the day feels flat. You sit among things that used to spark curiosity and nothing happens. You listen to music that once made your chest bloom with feeling, and it now passes through you like wind through an empty house. Conversations feel muffled. Activities feel distant. Even happiness feels like a memory someone else once told you. You begin to wonder, what's wrong with me? Why does nothing bring me joy anymore? This is perhaps one of the most frightening questions a human being can face, because it touches the deepest fear of all, the fear that something in you has broken. But what if the opposite is true? What if nothing brings you joy because something in you is finally working? You see, joy is not something you manufacture. It is something that arises naturally when you are aligned with your own life. It comes uninvited, like a bird singing on your windowsill. You don't have to force it, and you certainly don't have to chase it. Joy is the fragrance of a life lived from the center of oneself. So, when joy disappears, it is not because you have failed. It is because something in you is shifting. Something is dissolving. Something is releasing its grip. There is a phase of awakening that no one likes to talk about. A phase where the colors of life fade, the meaning drains out of your ambitions, and the things you once depended on for emotional nourishment no longer satisfy you. You feel empty, unmoved, disconnected, as though the world has stepped away from you. But what has really happened is that you have stepped away from the world you created before you understood yourself. The numbness you feel is not the death of joy. It is the death of stimulation, the death of distraction, the death of an identity that was built to cope, to perform, to impress, to survive. You cannot find joy because you are no longer resonating with the version of yourself that used to seek it. Now, this stage feels terribly confusing. You may think you are depressed, or apathetic, or emotionally dull, but numbness is not a malfunction. Numbness is a signal. It means your inner system is shutting down outdated pathways. It is refusing to sustain the old narrative. It is pulling you inward, away from noise and toward truth. Imagine you are holding a cup filled with muddy water. The more you swirl it, the murkier it becomes. But if you allow it to become still, the sediment sinks. Clarity emerges from quiet, not from motion. In the same way, your joy sinks when life is asking you to be still, not because joy is gone, but because clarity needs space to surface. The absence of emotion is not the beginning of despair. It is the beginning of purification. You see, the universe is remarkably intelligent, far more intelligent than the thinking mind. And when the life you have been living no longer matches the truth of who you are becoming, the universe does a very gentle thing. It withdraws your excitement for that life. It takes away your enthusiasm, your craving, your emotional reward system, not to punish you, but to guide you toward a larger horizon. You cannot stay in old rooms once your soul has outgrown them. But because humans fear stillness, you interpret this withdrawal as a problem. You chase joy harder, only to feel it slip further through your hands. You try to recreate old pleasures, revive old habits, repeat old patterns, but joy does not return, and the more you force, the more exhausted you become. You begin to ask, why can't I feel anything? But stillness is not nothingness. It is information. It is your inner being saying, you must stop now. You must listen. You must see what is really happening. The collapse of joy is the first sign that the old you is dissolving. The identity you built to survive your childhood, or to satisfy society, or to earn validation, or to keep yourself safe, its time has run out. And the dissolution of an identity always feels like the dissolution of feeling, because for a moment you do not know who you are supposed to be. You are no longer the person you once were, but not yet the person you are becoming. This in-between space is emotionally quiet, and in the quiet, joy hides. Not because joy has left, but because it belongs to the self you are growing into, not the self you are shedding. Now, some people try to escape this phase. They try to feel something, anything, through distraction. They seek stimulation, drama, high highs, low lows, anything to convince themselves they are still alive. They fear the quiet because the quiet feels like emptiness. But emptiness is misunderstood. Emptiness is not the absence of life. It is the clearing of space for life to enter. It is the moment the soil is turned before new seeds are planted. You cannot grow anything on ground that is cluttered with old roots. So life uproots you. It empties you of old joy so that new joy can take root. This process is not comfortable, but it is necessary, because the joy you used to feel was not deep enough. It was joy based on external stimulation, joy based on identity, joy that depended on circumstances going your way, joy that could be taken from you. Life wants something more stable for you, something deeper, something that comes from within rather than from the world. And so it takes away the old joy, so you can discover a joy that rises from presence, not performance. And this transition is always prefaced by numbness. Before the heart can feel more, it must feel less. Before consciousness expands, it withdraws from the surface of things. Before the self awakens, it sleeps. This is why nothing brings you joy, because the part of you that used to chase joy is dissolving, and the part of you that will experience real joy has not yet fully awakened. Imagine a caterpillar. Before it becomes a butterfly, there is a moment when it is neither one nor the other. It dissolves entirely into a kind of living soup, a formless in-between. If it were capable of emotion, it might say, nothing feels meaningful anymore. I don't know what I am. I feel like nothing. But the caterpillar is not dying. It is reorganizing. You are reorganizing. The numbness is your cocoon. The emptiness is your metamorphosis. You are not losing joy. You are losing the version of yourself that required the world to provide it. And here is something even more subtle. The universe often removes joy when you have been living on borrowed energy, when you have been pushing yourself ignoring yourself, betraying yourself in small ways. When you have been moving too fast for too long, when your nervous system is exhausted beyond what you can consciously admit, sometimes nothing brings you joy because your body is simply tired, tired of enduring, tired of pretending, tired of performing optimism, tired of carrying the weight of expectations and emotional obligations, tired of trying to survive without rest. And so joy shuts down, not as a failure, but as protection. Your system cannot run on empty forever. It forces stillness when you refuse to give it willingly. This is why joylessness feels like being underwater. The world is muted because you are being asked to rest. You are being asked to face the quiet truth of your own exhaustion. Now, the mind resists this fiercely. It says, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be excited. I should be productive. I should be grateful. But the universe is not interested in your shoulds. It is only interested in your truth. And truth often arrives disguised as stillness, because only in stillness can you finally hear what your life has been trying to tell you. When joy collapses, meaning begins to loosen. The things that once held your identity together no longer feel solid. You begin to question who you are, what you want, what you believe, and why you have lived the way you have lived. This questioning is not a crisis, it is clarity. It is the beginning of authenticity. To awaken is to feel the collapse of borrowed meaning, the collapse of external joy, the collapse of the old self. To awaken is to pass through numbness on the way to truth. And here is the great paradox. Joy disappears because you are finally ready to feel real joy, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being, not the joy of pleasure, but the joy of presence, not the joy of escape, but the joy of awareness. Real joy does not rise quickly. It rises slowly, like a tide. It rises from quiet, and before it rises, the shoreline must be cleared. This clearing is happening now. You are not broken. You are being prepared. You are not emotionally dead. You are emotionally resetting. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. The reason nothing brings you joy is because the old you can no longer be satisfied with the world that once comforted it. Your sensitivity is changing. Your awareness is deepening. Your soul is taking the steering wheel from your persona. And personas do not surrender joyfully. So the universe removes joy. It removes stimulation. It removes old meaning. It removes everything you used to lean on. And in that removal, you begin to stand on the ground of yourself for the first time. There is a point, usually after the numbness has lingered longer than you thought you could endure, when something almost imperceptible begins to shift. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself with fireworks or dramatic emotion. It comes in the smallest way, so subtle that you nearly miss it. A moment where your breath feels slightly deeper. A moment where the world looks a touch less flat. A moment where a sound or a glimpse of light stirs something faint in your chest. It is not joy itself, but the space joy will return to. You see, before joy can return, the place inside you that receives joy has to be rebuilt. The old structure collapsed with your old identity, and you cannot feel joy through an identity that is dissolving. Joy cannot enter a house that is being rebuilt. The foundation must be cleared, the walls must be undone, the windows must be opened. This is the work that numbness does. Numbness is the renovation of the inner world. And once the renovation reaches a certain point, you begin to feel again. Not fully, not dramatically, but honestly. This is the first sign that you have entered the second phase of awakening, the phase where your emotional life begins to reorganize itself around presence rather than identity. You begin to sense that beneath the quiet, something is alive, something is breathing, something is waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. You may wake up one morning and find that the silence feels less like emptiness and more like spaciousness. You may look at the sky and feel a faint recognition of beauty, not because the sky changed, but because your capacity to perceive it is returning. You may sit with yourself and feel a softness that was unavailable to you before. This is how the new joy approaches, not as excitement, but as gentleness, not as a high, but as a deepening. Joy begins to return as presence. Presence is the ability to inhabit your own life without the filter of expectation or fear. It is the ability to feel without interpreting, without managing, without controlling. Presence is the purest form of awareness. It is the ground of all real joy. Now, at first, this presence can feel unfamiliar. You are used to emotion arriving in waves, in highs and lows, in bursts of enthusiasm or disappointment. But presence brings a different flavor of experience. It is quieter, steadier, more patient. It does not intoxicate. It does not overwhelm. It simply reveals. And so joy shuts down, not as a failure, but as protection. Your system cannot run on empty forever. It forces stillness when you refuse to give it willingly. This is why joylessness feels like being underwater. The world is muted because you are being asked to rest. You are being asked to face the quiet truth of your own exhaustion. Now, the mind resists this fiercely. It says, I shouldn't feel this way. I should be excited. I should be productive. I should be grateful. But the universe is not interested in your shoulds. It is only interested in your truth. And truth often arrives disguised as stillness, because only in stillness can you finally hear what your life has been trying to tell you. When joy collapses, meaning begins to loosen. The things that once held your identity together no longer feel solid. You begin to question who you are, what you want, what you believe, and why you have lived the way you have lived. This questioning is not a crisis. It is clarity. It is the beginning of authenticity. To awaken is to feel the collapse of borrowed meaning, the collapse of external joy, the collapse of the old self. To awaken is to pass through numbness on the way to truth. And here is the great paradox. Joy disappears because you are finally ready to feel real joy, not the joy of excitement, but the joy of being, not the joy of pleasure, but the joy of presence, not the joy of escape, but the joy of awareness. Real joy does not rise quickly. It rises slowly, like a tide. It rises from quiet, and before it rises, the shoreline must be cleared. This clearing is happening now. You are not broken. You are being prepared. You are not emotionally dead. You are emotionally resetting. You are not losing yourself. You are shedding yourself. The reason nothing brings you joy is because the old you can no longer be satisfied with the world that once comforted it. Your sensitivity is changing. Your awareness is deepening. Your soul is taking the steering wheel from your persona. And personas do not surrender joyfully. So the universe removes joy. It removes stimulation. It removes old meaning. It removes everything you used to lean on. And in that removal, you begin to stand on the ground of yourself for the first time. There is a point, usually after the numbness has lingered longer than you thought you could endure, when something almost imperceptible begins to shift. It does not arrive loudly. It does not announce itself with fireworks or dramatic emotion. It comes in the smallest way, so subtle that you nearly miss it. A moment where your breath feels slightly deeper. A moment where the world looks a touch less flat. A moment where a sound or a glimpse of light stirs something faint in your chest. It is not joy itself, but the space joy will return to. You see, before joy can return, the place inside you that receives joy has to be rebuilt. The old structure collapsed with your old identity, and you cannot feel joy through an identity that is dissolving. Joy cannot enter a house that is being rebuilt. The foundation must be cleared, the walls must be undone, the windows must be opened. This is the work that numbness does. Numbness is the renovation of the inner world. And once the renovation reaches a certain point, you begin to feel again. Not fully, not dramatically, but honestly. This is the first sign that you have entered the second phase of awakening, the phase where your emotional life begins to reorganize itself around presence rather than identity. You begin to sense that beneath the quiet, something is alive, something is breathing, something is waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. You may wake up one morning and find that the silence feels less like emptiness and more like spaciousness. You may look at the sky and feel a faint recognition of beauty, not because the sky changed, but because your capacity to perceive it is returning. You may sit with yourself and feel a softness that was unavailable to you before. This is how the new joy approaches, not as excitement, but as gentleness, not as a high, but as a deepening. Joy begins to return as presence. Presence is the ability to inhabit your own life without the filter of expectation or fear. It is the ability to feel without interpreting, without managing, without controlling. Presence is the purest form of awareness. It is the ground of all real joy. Now, at first, this presence can feel unfamiliar. You are used to emotion arriving in waves, in highs and lows, in bursts of enthusiasm or disappointment. But presence brings a different flavor of experience. It is quieter, steadier, more patient. It does not intoxicate. It does not overwhelm. It simply reveals. You begin to see that joy was never lost. It was simply waiting for you to return. The return of joy is the return of truth, the return of alignment, the return of the part of you that was buried beneath effort and identity. It does not matter how long you have been numb. It does not matter how deeply you believe something was wrong with you. Life has been reorganizing you in the dark, preparing you, softening you, bringing you to a place where joy can be recognized again, not as a burst of emotion, but as the quiet radiance of being awake. You see, joylessness is not the opposite of joy. It is the purification of joy. It is the space where old meanings dissolve so new ones can emerge. It is the silence before the deeper life begins. And now you stand at the threshold of that deeper life, a life in which you do not chase feeling, but allow feeling, a life where you do not grasp at joy, but recognize joy in everything, a life where you understand that joy is not something you find, but something you become. Because when the old you falls away, and the noise dissolves, and the numbness clears, you discover something astonishing. Joy was never in the world. It was always in your awareness of the world, and now that awareness is being restored. Not as it was before, but as something new, something deeper, something clearer, something truer. What returns now is not excitement. What returns now is not stimulation. What returns now is the simple miracle of being alive. This is the joy that cannot be taken from you. This is the joy that arises when you stop chasing and begin listening. This is the joy that emerges when you finally meet your life without resistance. This is the joy that was waiting for you in the silence. And now, because you have passed through the numbness, because you have been emptied, because you have surrendered the old identity, you can finally feel what was here all along. A joy that does not shout, a joy that does not vanish, a joy that does not depend on anything, a joy that simply is. This is the return. This is the rebirth. This is the beginning of a life lived from the center of yourself. And this is where joy begins.
You see, there's something rather peculiar that happens when you begin to wake up. When you stop playing the game quite so seriously, when you see through the great cosmic joke of it all, you become, how shall I put it, inconvenient. You become an irritation to those who are still fast asleep, still clutching desperately to their roles, their masks, their carefully constructed sense of who they think they are. It's not that you're trying to bother anyone. Quite the opposite. You're simply being. You're breathing. You're walking through life with a certain lightness, a certain freedom. But that very freedom, that very peace you carry, it disturbs something in others. It rattles their cages. And they don't even know why. Have you noticed this? You walk into a room, perfectly calm, perfectly friendly, and someone looks at you as if you've just insulted their entire family. You haven't said a word. You haven't done anything wrong. But your very presence seems to set off some invisible alarm in their nervous system. What's happening here? Why does your peace make them so uncomfortable? Why does your refusal to play the social games cause such strange reactions? Well, let me tell you what's really going on. When you awaken, when you see through the illusion of the separate self, when you stop identifying with the ego and all its desperate demands, you become a mirror. And mirrors, as you know, can be terribly uncomfortable things. They show people what they don't want to see. Not because you're judging them, not because you're trying to make them feel bad, but simply because you exist in a different way now. You're not playing by the old rules. And that makes the ego in others very, very nervous. So let's talk about the 5 ways people's egos will react to your awakening. Not so you can feel superior, mind you. That would just be your own ego sneaking back in through the side door. But so you can understand what's happening. So you can respond with compassion instead of confusion. So you can continue to walk your path without being thrown off by these reactions. When you stop defending yourself, when you stop justifying your choices, when you simply say no without a paragraph of reasons, something strange happens. People get upset. They demand explanations. They want you to prove that you have a good reason for living the way you live. You see, the ego loves to judge. It loves to evaluate, to measure, to determine whether someone else's choices meet its approval. And when you refuse to play this game, when you don't offer your life up for inspection, the ego feels robbed. It feels as though you're being rude, unfair, even arrogant. But here's the thing. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your existence. You don't need permission to be. You don't have to justify your peace, your choices, your way of moving through the world. When you're asleep, you probably spent enormous amounts of energy trying to make others understand you, trying to prove that you were living correctly. But now you've seen through that trap. You've realized that no amount of explaining will satisfy the ego's hunger for control. So what happens? People get irritated. They accuse you of thinking you're better than them. They say you've become distant, cold, difficult to reach. But you haven't changed in the way they think. You simply stopped performing. You stopped auditioning for a role in their drama. And the beautiful thing is, you don't need to argue about it. You don't need to defend your refusal to defend yourself. You simply smile, perhaps, and go about your business, like water flowing around a rock. The rock can complain all it wants, but the water just keeps flowing. Number 2, they will test you to see if you're real. This is a curious one. When people sense that you've found something, some kind of peace or clarity they haven't found, they often can't resist testing it. It's like when you tell someone you're not bothered by something, and they immediately try to bother you about that very thing. They poke, they prod, they say things designed to get a reaction. Why do they do this? Because the ego in them wants to prove that you're just pretending. It wants to show that underneath your calm exterior, you're just as anxious, just as reactive, just as trapped as they are. If they can get you to break, to lose your composure, to snake back at them, then they can dismiss what you represent. They can go back to sleep feeling justified. You might find people bringing up old arguments, mentioning things they know used to upset you, creating situations designed to push your buttons. A colleague at work might suddenly start criticizing everything you do. A family member might bring up that one topic they know always started fights. A friend might make comments about how you've changed, how you're not fun anymore, how you take yourself too seriously, or not seriously enough. And here's what's marvelous about this. If you react, if you get defensive or angry or upset, their ego wins. It gets to say, see, I knew it, you're not really at peace, you're just putting on an act. But if you don't react, if you remain calm and present, their ego gets even more irritated. Because now it can't dismiss you. Now it has to face the possibility that what you have might be real. So what do? You let them test. You let them poke and prod, not because you're trying to prove anything, but because you genuinely aren't bothered anymore. You've seen through the dream. You know that their testing is just their own fear speaking, their own ego trying to protect itself from the possibility of change. Number 3, they will gossip and create stories about you. When you stop participating in the constant drama of social life, when you stop gossiping, stop complaining, stop playing the games of alliance and betrayal, something interesting happens. You become a subject of gossip yourself. People will create stories about you. They'll say you think you're better than everyone else. They'll say you've become strange, disconnected, too spiritual, not grounded. They'll wonder what's wrong with you, what happened to make you so different. And they'll discuss all of this behind your back, weaving theories and explanations for your behavior. Why does this happen? Because the ego needs to make sense of things. When someone steps outside the usual patterns, the ego in others becomes uncomfortable. It needs to categorize, to label, to put you in a box it can understand. And if it can't find a box that fits, it will create one. Usually a box that makes you seem flawed, or foolish, or misguided in some way. You might hear through others that people are saying you've had some kind of breakdown, or that you're going through a phase, or that you've joined some weird spiritual cult. The stories will vary, but they'll all have one thing in common. They'll all be attempts to explain away what's happening with you in a way that protects their own worldview. And here's the thing. You cannot stop this. You cannot control what others say about you. If you try, if you go around defending yourself, correcting the stories, setting the record straight, you'll exhaust yourself. You'll be pulled right back into the drama you've been trying to step away from. The awakened response is to let them talk. Let them create their stories. Let them gossip and theorize and worry about you if they want to. Their stories have nothing to do with you anyway. Their stories about their own fears, their own resistance to change, their own unwillingness to question the game they're playing. As they say, what others think of you is none of your business. And it really isn't. You are not the character in their story. You are simply you, walking your path, being present, living with awareness. The rest is just noise. Number 4. They will try to pull you back into old patterns. This one can be particularly tricky, especially with people you've known for a long time. Family members, old friends, people who knew you before you woke up. They remember the old you. The you who played the games, who got upset about the things they got upset about, who participated in all the usual dramas. And now you've changed. You don't react the same way. You don't get pulled into the same arguments. You don't play your old role in the family dynamic or the social group. And this makes them uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. So what do? They try to pull you back. They'll bring up old memories, trying to remind you of who you used to be. They'll invite you into old patterns of relating. They'll create situations where you're expected to play your old part. And if you don't, they'll express hurt or confusion or frustration. A mother might say, you used to tell me everything what happened. A friend might complain that you're not the same person anymore, that you've lost your sense of humor, that you're no fun. A sibling might accuse you of thinking you're too good for the family now. It suggests that maybe others could change too. And that's a frightening thought for the ego. Change means uncertainty. Change means the comfortable patterns might not hold. So they resist your transformation by trying to make you the same person you used to be, but you can't go back. Even if you wanted to, you couldn't. Once you've seen through the illusion, once you've tasted real freedom, the old ways of being feel like costumes that no longer fit. You can love these people. You can be kind to them. You can spend time with them. But you cannot pretend to be someone you're not anymore just to make them comfortable. So what do? You remain present. You remain loving. But you don't take the bait. When they try to pull you into an old argument, you don't argue. When they try to make you feel guilty for changing, you don't defend yourself. You simply are who you are now, and you trust that either they'll adjust to this new way of relating, or they won't. And either way, you continue on your path. Number 5. They will feel uncomfortable in your presence. This is perhaps the most subtle and the most powerful reaction. When you've awakened, when you're no longer identified with the ego and all its games, your very presence becomes uncomfortable for those who are still deeply asleep. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's not that you're judging them or looking down on them or trying to make them feel bad. In fact, you might be more tamed, more present, more genuinely interested in them than you ever were before, but something about your energy, your way of being, makes them squirm. Why? Because consciousness is contagious. When you're present, when you're not caught up in the constant chatter of the mind, when you're simply being, it creates a space of stillness, a space of awareness. And in that space, other people's ego chatter becomes suddenly very loud to them. They become aware, even if just slightly, of the noise in their own heads. They become aware of their own anxiety, their own restlessness, their own constant need to be somewhere else, doing something else, being someone else. Your peace mirrors their chaos. Your stillness reflects their agitation. And instead of using this as an opportunity to question their own way of being, the ego's first instinct is to blame you for making them uncomfortable. It's your fault they feel this way. You're too serious. You're too calm. You're too quiet. Something must be wrong with you if you're not as anxious and busy and worried as they are. You might notice people don't want to sit with you in silence. They fill every gap with chatter. They ask you what you're thinking, what's wrong, why you're so quiet. They interpret your presence as judgment, when it's simply presence. They project onto you their own discomfort with stillness, with silence, with simply being. And here's the beautiful paradox. The very thing that makes them uncomfortable, your awakened presence, is exactly what they need. Your stillness invites them to be still. Your peace offers them the possibility of peace. Your freedom shows them that freedom is possible. But the ego resists this invitation with everything it has, because accepting it means death to the ego. It means letting go of all the games, all the stories, all the desperate attempts to prove its existence. So some people will simply avoid you. They'll make excuses not to spend time with you. They'll drift away from your life. And that's okay. You cannot force anyone to wake up. You cannot drag them into awareness. All you can do is be who you are, and trust that those who are ready will be drawn to what you represent. Others might accuse you of being judgmental, even though you're not judging them at all. They feel judged simply by being in the presence of someone who's not playing the game anymore. Your very existence questions their choices, even though you're not saying a word about their choices. This is projection. They judge themselves and then project that judgment onto you. The awakened response is compassion, because you remember what it was like to be asleep. You remember the constant anxiety, the need to defend yourself, the exhausting game of trying to be somebody. You remember how uncomfortable it was to be around anyone who seemed to have found something you were still desperately seeking. So you don't take their discomfort personally. You don't make it mean anything about you. You simply continue to be present, to be kind, to be available if they want to talk, or be silent together. Now here's what's important to understand about all 5 of these reactions. They are not about you. They're about the other person's relationship with their own ego. When you awaken, you become a mirror. And what people see in that mirror is not you, it's themselves. They see their own fears, their own resistance, their own attachment to the game they're playing. Some will look in the mirror and feel inspired. They'll want to know what you've found. They'll ask questions. They'll be curious about this peace you seem to carry. These are the ones who are ready, who are beginning to wake up themselves. They recognize in you something they've been looking for, even if they don't know what to call it yet. But others will look in the mirror and feel threatened, and they'll react in one or more of the ways we've discussed. They'll demand explanations, test you, gossip about you, try to pull you back, or simply feel uncomfortable around you. And all of this is just the ego's way of protecting itself from the possibility of change. The woman who glares at you in the grocery store is not really seeing you. She's seeing her own discomfort reflected back at her. The colleague who constantly criticizes you is not really responding to what you do. He's responding to what your way of being says about his way of being. The family member who accuses you of thinking you're better than everyone is not really talking about you. They're talking about their own insecurity, their own fear of change. Second, you remain compassionate because you know that being asleep is suffering. You know what it's like to be trapped in the ego's games, to feel that constant low-grade anxiety, to always be defending yourself against some imagined threat. So when people react to you in these ways, you see it for what it is. Cry for help. A desperate attempt to maintain the only sense of self they know. Third, you don't dim your light to make others comfortable. This is crucial. You might be tempted, out of kindness, to go back to playing some of the old games, to pretend you're still asleep, just to fit in, just to avoid making waves. But this doesn't serve anyone. Your light, your awakened presence, is a gift to the world, even when it makes people uncomfortable, especially when it makes people uncomfortable, because that discomfort is the first step toward questioning, toward waking up. Fourth, you trust the process. You understand that awakening is not something you can give to anyone else. They have to find it themselves. Your job is not to wake anyone up. Your job is simply to be awake yourself. And in being awake, in living from that place of presence and peace, you offer a possibility. You show that another way is available. What others do with that possibility is up to them. And fifth, you keep your sense of humor about the whole thing. 'Cause really, isn't it rather funny? The great cosmic joke of it all. Here we are, consciousness pretending to be separate individuals, egos fighting with other egos, all of us forgetting that we're the same thing, looking at itself through different eyes. When you see this, when you really get the joke, you can't help but laugh. Not at others, but with them. Because we're all in this ridiculous play together. You see, the irritation people feel is not a problem to be solved. It's part of the process. It's part of how awakening spreads. One person wakes up, and their presence creates ripples. Some people surf those ripples toward their own awakening. Others resist them, build walls against them, pretend they don't feel them. But the ripples continue. The presence continues. The light continues to shine. And here's the final secret. The more you stop caring about these reactions, the more effective your presence becomes. When you're trying to prove something, trying to convince others, trying to make them see, you're still caught in the ego game. But when you simply are, when you live your life with presence and peace without any agenda, without any need for others to understand or approve, that's when the real magic happens. Because then you're not playing the game at all. You're not trying to win. You're not defending yourself. You're not even trying to wake anyone up. You're just being. And being is the most powerful thing in the world. Being is what the ego cannot withstand. Being is what gradually dissolves all the games, all the stories, all the desperate attempts to be somebody special. So let them react. Let them demand explanations. Let them test you. Let them gossip. Let them try to pull you back. Let them feel uncomfortable. It's all part of the dance. It's all part of the play. And you just keep being present, aware, free. You walk through the world like water through rocks, like wind through trees, like light through darkness. Not forcing anything, not resisting anything, simply flowing, simply being. And in that simple being, you offer the most powerful teaching of all. The teaching that has no words. The teaching that cannot be explained. The teaching that irritates every ego it encounters because it shows, without saying a word, that the emperor has no clothes. That the game we're all playing is just a game. That underneath all the roles and masks and stories, there is simply this presence, this awareness, this being. And that, my friends, is quite enough.